Perfect. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar on residential energy code submittals. This webinar will be recorded, and the recording is posted to the Colorado Energy Office's Code Adoption Toolkit. And that'll probably take about a week or so. So check back there if you want to reference it. If there are any issues with audio, just write me in the chat. My name is Erica DeLello. I'm a project manager for Noresco. This series is sponsored by Excel Energy and the Colorado Energy Office with training materials created by Shems Coda Associates. So Hope and I have been working with Excel and CEO to provide trainings just like this one. And on the screen right now, I've got a list of upcoming trainings. So Hope at some point, if you feel like posting the registration link in the chat for the Excel webinars, that'd be great. And the CEO webinars are still being developed, but I'll send out a link for registration in the next couple of weeks. So keep an eye out for that. And we also offer tailored group trainings or technical assistance for jurisdictions that are looking at updating to the latest I-codes, the 2018s or the 2021s. And as I mentioned, the Code Adoption Toolkit, and we've got all of these resources on there if you're not familiar, but there's one resource that I really want to highlight today, which is the Colorado Codes Helpline. And this helpline is available to anyone in Colorado on any of the I-codes or REACH codes. So for example, if you're a jurisdiction and need assistance on a plan review, or a homeowner or an engineer with a question about code applicability, you can submit a ticket and a subject matter expert will get back to you in just a couple of days' time. You can access the helpline through the Code Adoption Toolkit, which I'll put a link in the chat shortly, or feel free to scan the QR code and bookmark that page for any of your code questions. So throughout the webinar, we do want to encourage questions. Please use that Q&A function, and I'll let our presenter know at the end. There is also the ability to raise your hand and ask a question, and then I can unmute you. So please, there'll also be polls throughout today to kind of gauge the audience. And then lastly, there's a survey window that'll pop up following the webinar. So if you could please take a minute and provide some feedback so we can continue to improve on these webinars, that'd be greatly appreciated. So today's presenter is Hope Medina, and Hope is an energy and sustainability consultant for Shems Coda Associates. She's worked on a national level to develop, promote, and assist with adopting energy and green codes. Hope is also a governing member of the ICC Sustainability Membership Council, Consensus Committee member, and task group chair of the National Green Building Standard for several cycles now. So we're in good hands for this one. So with that, I will let you, Hope, take it from here, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. I hope you are ready for lots of fun to discuss what is really needed for submittal when we're talking about the residential energy code. And Erica, would you mind putting up the first poll on who is in attendance today while I get the screens all switched out?
Sure thing.
Uh-oh.
Got a good amount of attendees today. It's great. Lots of interest in the energy code submittals.
Wonderful. Oops. Okay, wonderful. Just quick question. Can you see my screen now?
We can.
Perfect. Okay. So just so that you're aware, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera because I don't have any battery life. So what is our makeup of the class today? All right, architects, engineers, contractors. I think we have a really good mix going on here. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. And there we go. Perfect. There we go. So the energy code really has a whole lot of guidance as far as information and to really help facilitate you in being able to gain and get energy compliance, and really gives you a roadmap as far as the items that are needed for submittal. So if we go into our 103.2, there is a list of items that are actually specified to be placed on the construction documents on the plans. Now, we're going to run through some of these items to make you very familiar with what exactly the intent is. Now, they're very similar whether you're on the 15 or 18 energy code, or if you're moving to the 21 or are currently on the 21. There's really only one difference, and that one difference happens to be that energy compliance path. It is required that you declare on the plans which energy compliance path this particular project was designed to. Nobody gets to make the decision as far as which energy compliance path is getting utilized other than the person who is designing the building. The architect, the designer, the building owner, those are the people that are going to determine which energy compliance path. Now, I've had times where I've sent out a review comment that says, which energy compliance path was this project designed to? And I've had a comment come back that says the contractor will determine that. The contractor has no say in this other than if they're there at the beginning. This should all be determined for them so they know how to proceed with how they're going to build this building or construct this building. So let's take a look and see what exactly each of these paths are. So in the 18 and in the 15, you have the option of prescriptive, which is the method, but you have options within that. So if you say prescriptive, that doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for anyone because there's so many caveats within the code that really needs to be defined. If you say prescriptive, you need to say insulation and fenestration, the U factor alternative, or going total UA alternative. So that I know which documents I need to be looking at and verifying with what's actually on the plans. And then of course you have the total building performance, or I believe in the 18, it's the simulated building performance option, and then the energy rating index, or the ERI. Now, if we're on the 21, it is different. There are more options within the core of the three methods. You have prescriptive, which again, you have the insulation and fenestration criteria. Maybe you notice that the R value alternative is no longer the U factor alternative. And that's because these two tables switched within the 2021. The U factor table is now the predominant table because that's the basis of where all the other compliance paths are out of. Although we as a whole probably think of that R value table more fondly, and that's the one that we are associating with often. And then you have your total UA alternative, and then of course your total building performance, and then you have the energy rating index, or the ERI. Now within the ERI, there is two pathways that has become available within it. One is if you are utilizing on-site renewable energy, there are components that you have to comply with. And then if you are not using on-site renewable energy, then there are different parameters that you're going to have to follow. So you can no longer just say prescriptive, performance, and ERI. You're going to have to be more explicit as far as the options within two of the three pathways. So the next thing in line is really defining what that thermal envelope is. So if you go into R103.2.1, which is a subsection of this list, it says you must define that thermal envelope. And it can be something as simple as what you see on the left-hand side, or it could be something that is a little bit more complex on the right-hand side. Now, I should be able to take my finger and trace the areas that are the thermal envelope without lifting my finger because the thermal envelope is broken. So a great example is, I hope you can see my arrow. If you look on the right-hand side, on the right side of the building, I can see insulation going all the way up this exterior wall. We've got insulation at the roof line, a little at the roof line again, this exterior wall, roof line. Now this wall right here kind of comes into play because is it part of it? It's hard to be able to tell on the screen, and actually on the plans, the original plans, it was difficult to see too. Then we come over here for there's a roof line, and then we come all the way down. Now where there becomes a question in my mind is right here, we've got insulation at this floor ceiling level. Now, for me, because I'm very familiar with the code, I instantly think, is that because of this storage is located outside the thermal envelope and this mechanical room is being located outside of the thermal envelope? If that's the case, there's other parameters that come in, or is what's being shown here sound attenuation? If it's sound attenuation that insulation is there for, then it's not part of the thermal envelope, but there are things that I truly need to be aware of with this. Now, there are also some areas that thermal envelope is extremely important that me as a plans examiner, I know how to treat, and then down the road, the contractor builder knows how to treat these spaces and the inspector knows how to treat these places. And it happens to be situations such as the crawl space. If that crawl space is going to be a vented crawl space, hopefully not, because vented crawl spaces are not a good design. But if it is going to be, then that means that the floor areas where I should be seeing insulation and the definition of that thermal envelope. Or the garage. Is that garage being conditioned? If the garage is being conditioned, then I need to see that those exterior walls of the garage are part of the thermal envelope and have the required above grade insulation values. Or is it the walls separating the garage from the dwelling unit? That may be where the thermal envelope lies. And then attic spaces. Is that attic going to be a conditioned attic? If it's a conditioned attic, then we need to be seeing that it's included within that thermal envelope. Another area, like I mentioned, is fuel burning appliance rooms. If you are bringing outside combustion air into these particular rooms, then they need to be thermally isolated or completely located outside of the thermal envelope. So knowing whether this is in or out and having that thermal envelope defined is really going to make a huge difference in how I'm going to look at these plans as a plans examiner. Contractors know how they need to treat those particular areas. They have to pay attention to them. And then also the inspector is given the information as far as making sure that all of the requirements of our 402.4.4 are being met. Now, when you look at insulation, you can't look at insulation and be able to tell whether that insulation is getting utilized for thermal or whether it's getting utilized for sound. So it would make a lot of sense to, I've seen where, like, if the sound's being placed in the floor, that on that floor, they'll just put a little note in there that says sound. So you can still use a section to define your thermal envelope, but just put a little notation in that floor system saying insulation for sound. Actually, they just put it as sound. Like exactly what you would see right here. And you might not think that defining the thermal envelope actually makes a whole lot of difference, but I just did a plan review yesterday where the first round of comments, I asked for the thermal envelope to be defined, and I ended up adding an additional 4 comments to the particular plan review just because of how they had defined the thermal envelope was incorrect. And it's actually so incredibly important and encompassed quite a few of those items that we just discussed, actually. Okay, so we've covered the compliance path, the thermal envelope. Now we're going to kind of hit that nitty gritty of the insulation materials and the R values. So we should be getting information, whether it's on the plans or it's in a res check or it's in a performance report or an ERI report that tells me exactly what is going to be utilized. I need to know what the R value is and what type of insulation material is going to be utilized. And the reason partially for that is we have to remember that the energy code is not a code that's on an island and just functions by itself. It works within the I codes family. That entire suite of codes all work together. So there are provisions that you're going to find within the IRC and the IBC. And I mention IBC because there are projects that are going to be built out of the IBC that are going to follow the residential provisions. There are requirements in there that actually we need to make sure that our insulation and our thermal envelope are working together to create a very healthy, safe structure and not causing a potential issue with these particular assemblies. And so knowing what the insulation material and their R values is going to be extremely important. Now, here are some average R value per inch per the type of insulation that you're going to find. Now, these values came from some of my associates that I work with within the manufacturing industry of these particular types of insulation. Now, they all mentioned to me, here's the average, but these are the high averages for the R values that you're going to get. I'll tell you with polyiso, the upper right hand one, typically when I ask for the spec for it, it's an R5 of what the value will be, not an R6 or an R7 per se. But I think it's very important to have an understanding and a grasp of the type of insulation that we see here. And the reason for that is because when we start talking about what the actual R value requirements are within particular components, such as in the roof, we have to make sure that we also have the type of correct structure to be able to maintain that structural integrity of those assemblies. So here's an example of something that was provided to me as far as giving me information about the type of insulation that's going in and what the R value is. So what I have shown and put little boxes around are a few of them. It tells me that here's an exterior wall that's going to have an R21 minimum insulation. Now, it doesn't give me the type of insulation that it's going to be, or what exactly it is. But my favorite one that says provide insulation R value per code. What is that? How do I know out in the field what it is that's going to be per code? So that's why this is very important. Now, what they did do is to rectify some of the concerns is they added this nice little, I guess you could say, legend up here that does incorporate some of the information that's needed. But quite honestly, if we were to have something that said, hey, our walls are going to be an R21 that has an index, just an index of some of the information, I think that would be very beneficial, not only for you, but it's down the line too. And having it on the plans, you have a better chance of actually getting it out in the field. Right? Because if the contractor doesn't know that you traded off that wall value for better windows, and they get the windows, it was supposed to be a 0.28, they got 0.30, the code says 0.30 on here, you have listed, 0.30, then they think that they're okay with that. It needs to be very explicit and just specified out for everyone. So here's one of my favorites. It's a builder who actually creates energy sheets. And in these energy sheets, it provides a whole lot of information. Like one, I can trace the thermal envelope. They tell me exactly what the R values are for the floors, the walls. They have a little note in here about their windows and glass doors are a 0.30, and that has a solar heat gain coefficient, because we'll talk about that in a minute. But that information, plus they had a section of notes on this page that pertain to the type of insulation that's going to get installed. This builder really embraced the energy code. They're a track builder and they do an excellent job, and I love getting plans from them. Okay, so we've talked about the insulation component required. Let's take a look about the fenestration. Now, fenestration quite often, in my opinion, unless it's listed on a res check or it's listed in a performance report or an ERI report, it's not often called out. People just assume, okay, we're going to put in whatever the value of the windows are. But we're going to have to be a lot more mindful of it, because in the 21, it used to be for many of the locations within Colorado, there was no requirement for a solar heat gain coefficient for residential. In the 21, there is now a requirement for a maximum solar heat gain coefficient for all of our glazing. So we now have to be very mindful of it. So we have two determining factors that need to be provided. So this note that's put on their energy sheet is extremely important. And the fact that it's just on a couple of sheets, I can look right here. Oh, windows and doors are going to be a 0.30 and solar heat gain is a 0.40. I know going out to inspect that the 30 and 40 is what I should be seeing on all of those stickers that are out there. So when it comes to being submittal, placing some sort of note like what you saw on that previous screen, or including it into the window schedule, because a lot of times we get window schedules, right? Even on the residential side, window schedules that are providing the information. Create an additional column on there. Actually, it would be two columns that provide that U factor and the solar heat gain coefficient. And then you have one location where everything is going to be located, and it'll be a huge benefit. Another option, like I said, is I've seen it where it's placed in a note section. This is their energy code compliance note section. And the really nice thing is this particular builder doesn't try to cram a whole bunch of notes on one sheet. This is very specific to their energy sheets, and they make it very readable, large, so nobody has to get a magnifying glass to figure out what solar heat gain or U factor should those windows be. And then it makes it really easy for the inspector to go out and make sure that we have the correct information. Now, another document that may be submitted, and I see this more on being utilized for alterations for an existing building, is utilizing that area weighted average. And that's where you take the U value for one, and then multiply it by the amount of area that one value has, and so forth and so forth. And then you add it, all of the U value, or the U value, divide it by the total square feet, and that gives you your average area weighted average U factor value. I don't see it getting particularly utilized for new projects, because the glazing industry really has taken hold of the energy code and provided a whole lot of glazing and fenestration options for us that they are producing, that the requirement or the option for that area weighted average is not as pertinent as it may have been utilized in the past. let's take just a quick second here, and I would love to ask the question of, I think it's the second one in the poll.
The jurisdiction one? Hope, on the
Yes,
thing? Okay.
yes, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll. And in the meantime, we do have a couple questions building up while we wait
Oh,
for
okay.
some answers. And this one was in regards to the thermal envelope, I believe. And where do you want the cross section? Do you need one in both directions, front to back or left to right, or just a single one?
I think it really depends on the home itself, the structure itself, because there may be times where just having it in a single one where it's that simple concept would work. When you have a more complicated design of that thermal envelope, you may have to portray it on several sections, or in conjunction with maybe a floor plan layout. In all reality, there's not a one size fits all. I've also seen where I've had to do the puzzle piece where you take, this section here and they show this cross section, and you have to try to put the puzzle pieces together and hope that everything kind of works out together. But my suggestion is typically you show several cross sections in a set of plans, and that would be my suggestion, is whenever you have a cross section like that, is to display where that thermal envelope is.
Perfect. Thanks, Hope.
All right, so what do we have as far as our results?
Looks like we've got mostly adopt and have an effect by June 30th, but some after July as well.
Well, that is wonderful information, just in the sense of it's always good to know. So let's talk about this next one, because this next one, I think on the residential side of things have gotten a lot better for many locations, but it is one of the areas that I think is lacking more times than not when we're talking about the requirements that should be provided when you are submitting. Now, this happens to be the air sealing details. Oops, I apologize. Now I'll go to that. So it actually states, as you saw there in that charging statement, it tells us that you must provide details on your construction documents, and it has to make it extremely clear as far as what the work will be and within the parameters of what's listed within this laundry list here. And number 9 or number 8, the last one in the list there, are air sealing details. So if you take a look at the table R402.4.1.1, and I'm sorry, I don't know what off the top of my head, the table out of chapter 11, it's a carbon copy of what you see here. The 15 and 18 are very, very similar. Now the 21, there are a couple of additions that have happened, such as air sealing of narrow cavities. In the past, narrow cavities in the 15 and 18, you only had to address the insulation component. Now it's saying, hey, you know what? You're going to also address the air leakage component of it. So for the most part, the concepts of this are all the same. So here are examples of how they have changed, or how they're very similar, just going side by side, 18 to the 21. And where you see the blue in the 18 is where there were changes from the 15. This table gets changed every cycle. And the reason why this table gets changed every single cycle is because there's always an effort to try and make it more usable for everyone. Because when we go out into the field, inspectors plans examiners aren't getting the correct information, the contractors aren't getting it, and then like when the raters go out, when they're doing their testing and verifying and so forth, they aren't seeing it out there. So Robbie, our local rater guru, amongst many other things, he works on this table every single cycle to make it so explicit and so user friendly, to really make it easier for everyone. So now we're going to play a little game, and Erica, I'll need your help on this. So my question for all of you is, would you accept the comment at the top that just says the building thermal envelope shall be durably sealed to limit air infiltration? The following shall be pulp gasketed, weather stripped, or otherwise sealed with an air barrier material, suitable film, or solid material, then list the items? Or would you accept the three little excerpts as complying with the requirement to demonstrate air barriers? So my question is, raise your hand if you would accept the top as an acceptable means of demonstrating the requirement for air barriers.
All right, let's give it a minute here.
It looks like it's goes up and goes down. It goes up and goes down.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll cap it here.
We've got about 20.
Okay. And then lower your hands. How many of you would accept the bottom three as acceptable options for demonstrating air barrier compliance?
We're getting past 20 here, almost to 30.
All right.
It's like the popular choice.
Yes, that's excellent, excellent news, because here is what I will tell you, and this is what I accepted. These are from plans that I received. And so the top one, absolutely not. That going out there, seeing that top one, that does not provide any guidance, any information really for the contractors and builders to be successful in creating air barriers that are permitted by code and not creating an unhealthy situation. Now, the bottom ones, even though in 103.2 it specifically states that details are to be provided for these particular ones, because they were very good at basically explaining it step by step, I did accept these as options in demonstrating compliance with the components of that tail. Now, what I will tell you is a picture is worth 1,000 words. It makes it so incredibly easy to take a look at that top left-hand image and say, okay, I know exactly where the thermoply is going to go, or whatever is going to be utilized, where the insulation's going to be, the sealing that's going to happen. And I can see, you know, from the image below that we got what the image, the detail above gave us. Now, like I said, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and it's extremely useful. If you were to look at the words that are listed in the bottom, they are very prone to interpretation, right? Because is it a 2-inch spray foam and an R12 batt insulation? Are you putting the batt R12 in and then 2 inches of spray foam? Or, you know, there's a lot of possibilities when you put it in words, as far as how I read it, how you read it or intended for it to be read, how the contractor reads it, and how the inspector reads it, right? This makes it, in my opinion, very clear exactly how you designed it. You go through pane details of how you want walls built, to make sure that the contractor does it exactly the way that you want it. And we need to make sure that we include the components of an air barrier, because if you think about it, we don't want to have a situation where the inspector or the contractor had that top one that just said, hey, create this. The inspector goes out and says, oh, no, you can't have it this way. It actually will cause an issue with, we'll just say, the wall. And so now the contractor has to correct it. Well, that just cost the contractor obviously time and money, because now they have to take the time to, remove what was not approved. They have to get the new material to fix the issue of what it was. All of that costs them time, because we know that the crew is not just sitting around waiting for, work to be thrown on them. Chances are they're already at a different site. So now they have to wait for somebody else. And it's also an additional inspection in time for the inspector to come on out with, where we could have potentially eliminated that issue by having these details readily available. So my next poll I would like to do, Erica, do you happen to have that one?
I do.
Would you
Is it
mind
the
pulling it up? I'm
energy
so sorry.
compliance path?
No, it would be the air barrier locations.
Okay, gotcha. There you go.
Wonderful.
We are live.
So this question is really pertaining to you as an architect designer. How do you typically show air barrier, air sealing as a plans examiner? What are you typically seeing as far as that information being provided to you? As a contractor, how is that information getting portrayed to you? And as an inspector, where are you finding this? So no matter what position and role you take in construction, how are you seeing these air barrier, air sealing components being provided for you?
All right, I'll give it another couple seconds here so everyone can get their responses in. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And here are the results. We got a combination of notes and details in the lead.
All right. Okay. What to me is very concerning is the none provided. That's a very high number. And just a copy of the table, and only 2% are getting details of each component. But I am happy to see that it wasn't, or the lead wasn't none provided. Good news, everyone.
Seriously.
That's great. All right. Okay, so that kind of ends the components of what you're going to find as far as the thermal envelope out of this list. Now, obviously, there's other items that need to be addressed. So within this list, there are some mechanical items. It's mechanical system design criteria, whatever type of system that you're utilizing, the equipment type, size, and efficiency, and then duct sealing, duct and pipe insulation, and where all of this is located. Whoops. Oh, there we go. So here's one of those items that, you get asked about often. And that is the requirement for a manual J, a manual S, and a manual D. A manual J is the calculations that are utilized for your heating and cooling loads. A manual S is sizing the equipment in accordance with those heating and cooling loads. And a manual D deals with the duct work involved, the runs, the size, the location, the insulation, the fittings, the turns, all of that good stuff should be included in that manual D. Now, this is one of those times where both the IRC, the IMC, and the Energy Code all work together and require that the same information be provided. So as you can see, what you see on the screen is actually somewhat of a carbon copy of the requirement out of the mechanical section of the IMC or the IRC. So we should be receiving all 3 of those particular reports. They've actually been in the code. The Manual J and Manual S have been in the code since the UBC 1992. So this isn't a new requirement by any way, shape, or form. It's just probably getting more highly popular, or maybe unpopular, depending on how you look at it. Because really where we get our energy efficiency, that tangible return on investment type of energy efficiency, is our mechanical equipment, our service water heating equipment. And that's because by having our equipment sized appropriately, having the correct efficiency installed, and having a good design if you are utilizing ductwork, is actually going to lower the utilities, the amount of energy that is required by that, which should lower your utilities, in the sense that if you just put in a minimum and you didn't do the sizing, you're like, oh, you look at it, oh, it should be a 4-ton, when reality is when you do the heating and cooling loads, it's a 2-ton. Yeah, you've doubled it, right? So these are the type of items that we need. And so here's an example of what a Manual J would look like. This one, I believe, is the right soft. I can't tell at the top. I believe that this is the right soft format. And so you can see it gives us the information of the design criteria, which is required. And then at the bottom, it gives us the equipment size, the efficiency, and the type of equipment that's going to get utilized. So this report actually takes care of 3 items that you saw in that table. Now, here's an example of how a Manual D should look like, what we should be getting on this. It lets me know a whole lot of information. And sometimes the thing that isn't actually put on there would be something like sealing the ducts and joints, or the duct work, making sure that the air handler is sealed. And I'll see that quite often actually as a note on where the information is for the mechanical equipment. But another thing this duct design gives me is, if this duct work is located outside of the thermal envelope, I know how much insulation is required, because the Manual D tells me what size of ductwork it is. So this particular run right here is 5 inches. If it happens to be located in the attic, it would be required to be insulated to an R8. But if it's a supply run in the crawl space, then I know that it happens to be only required to be an R6. So this can provide a whole plethora of information for everyone. Now, the one thing I'm going to caution you is, we may get all of these particular documents, but we have to keep in mind, we have to have the conversation, because everything needs to match. Whatever's listed on the construction plan should match what's on the energy compliance documents, which should match what's on the Manual JD&S. And often this isn't the case. And a lot of times I hear that Manual JD&S values are way off from what the other 2 are. And it's not because they're trying to pull a fast one by any way, shape, or form. We all know that things evolve when construction happens, whether it's we have to change something because we can't get that material in, or, whatever the case may be, the owner decided that they wanted to put in R40 in the walls instead of the R20 in the walls. Whatever it is, things will get changed on the plans, things will get changed with the compliance document. But typically that Manual J, D, and S is done at the very beginning, when all of the project is just starting off. Here are the values we're going to do. And then the changes don't necessarily get transferred over to whoever did the Manual J, D, and S. So communication is going to be very important. If you change something, let whoever does the Manual J know, so that they can adjust it within their system too. Because it's really easy for them to change out a couple of components than it is to have it submitted to the city. The city says, hey, here's a whole bunch of review comments to your Manual J because things don't match, as opposed to just letting them know, change those couple of items, and then get that Manual J out the door. Okay, so equipment and system controls. There are requirements now that we need to really kind of pay attention to. on the 2021 residential side, we now have requirements that is going to require that interior lighting have controls. Now you have options. It can be a dimmer, it can be an occupancy sensor or another type of control that's installed with there, maybe a timer. But it has to be built into the fixture. And then with that, there are some very few items that have exceptions, like bathrooms and hallways. Your exterior lighting fixtures, don't worry, we'll take care of that. And any areas where lighting is designated for safety or security. Now, number 4 is not pertaining to, I want to make sure that my stairs are safe or that my kitchen is safe type of deal. When they're talking about safety or security, remember that the residential provisions of the IECC go beyond just the single family, the 2-family and townhouses. R2s, R3s, and R4s that are 3 stories or less are required to comply with the residential provisions as opposed to the commercial provisions. So they may have an egress stairwell that is going to need to be lit and cannot be placed on an occupancy sensor. So that is what number 4 is referring to as far as the safety and security issues. Now, it's already being shown. Here's an example of a set of plans that has shown this. At the time, this was on the 15, but they put motion sensors in a lot of those areas. And this would take care of that requirement. Now, there are requirements for exterior lighting. So while it didn't comply with that first section, it does have to comply with this. So basically it says that if you have lighting power that's greater than 30 watts, you're going to need to comply with the 3 items below, which is controlled by an on-off switch, that's going to allow for automatic shut-off action, but it will have to shut off when there's daylight present and it satisfies what the lighting needs are, and then controls that are going to override that automatic shut-off so that things return within a 24-hour period. So this is the type of controls that you're going to need to make sure is submitted now if you're submitting under the 2021 for the residential. And here's just real easy examples right up here. In this particular item, I know that there's a timer for this lighting. There's a timer for this lighting. So this would portray all of that. Now, these are all the items that are required to be submitted and examples that should be submitted when we're talking about for the residential side that pertains to this particular list. Now, what isn't on this list? Anybody have any thoughts of what's missing from this list, but definitely needs to be provided at submittal? Oh, I guess it's probably.
Feel free to write in the chat if you've got an idea. I think I have an inkling, Hope.
Okay, I think you might too. Do we have any responses by chance?
We've got solar, expanded data. So we're kind of hitting on it, but solar ready, temperature controls. So
all right, so here are all of those could very easily be listed and provided and should be provided. If you are on solar ready provisions, there are very specific items that are required to be placed on the construction document. So you would need to comply with Appendix RB for that, unless you've written your own. But the one thing that really should be listed on there is vapor barrier. Now, remember, a vapor barrier is there, it's to keep moisture from entering that wall assembly, or if it does enter that wall assembly, to allow for it to leave if it does happen to get in there. So this is extremely important. A lot of times what I'll see is it'll say a class 1 or class 2 vapor barrier, but doesn't tell me what it is. Well, we have to keep in mind, and in the IECC, it actually refers you back to the sections for vapor retarders out of the IBC and out of the IRC, because it's so important to make sure that we are not creating a wall assembly that's actually going to fail, right? And so if you happen to have continuous insulation on the exterior, and then you put a class 1 plastic on the interior side of it, now you have the opportunity where you're trapping moisture in that wall if it gets in there. So we have to be mindful of the type of vapor retarder that we're going to utilize, and our thermal envelope components, we have to work together. And so I think knowing exactly what that vapor retarder is and placing that on the plans, calling it out, put it in a very centralized location is going to be extremely important to make sure that we're working together and not causing problems. Another thing that should be listed on there would be, what type of whole house mechanical ventilation are you going to utilize? Are you going to utilize the supply only, the exhaust only, a balanced? Because that information is going to be extremely pertinent here in just a few moments, right? We have to remember, if we're going to build tight, we need to ventilate right. The next one, which is probably the elephant in the room type of situation, is the concept of this additional efficiency package option. In the 2021 on the residential side, we now have a requirement that you must do one of the following items if you have gone prescriptive. And it doesn't matter if you go with any of the 3 options, you still are required to go with an additional efficiency package. So one of your options is to have an enhanced envelope performance, meaning that you're going to meet 95% of the total UA. That may be somewhat difficult with our current values, but not impossible. More efficient HVAC equipment, it needs to be able to meet those particular requirements. Reduced energy use in service water heating. Remember that for both of these types of categories, not all equipment's going to meet these particular requirements, so keep that in mind. More efficient more efficient duct thermal distribution system, and then your improved air sealing and efficient ventilation system. So my question for all of you is, which additional efficiency package do you think you're going to see more often? Or which one are you going to use more often?
All right, we'll give it another couple seconds here. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll now.
Enhanced envelope performance. That is much higher than I thought it would be. Oh, so the one that has the least percentage here, the more efficient thermal distribution system. I think that honestly, that is going to be the highest one utilized. And here's the reason why. Because you have like complying with one of the 3 options. One of the options is to place your ductwork completely within that thermal envelope. If you have ductwork, I would say 9 times out of 10 right now, the design of the ductwork is putting that the ductwork completely in the thermal envelope. So this, while it's an additional efficiency package, I think it's going to be an easier obtainable additional efficiency package. And then, yeah, the more efficient HVAC equipment, there's a lot of jurisdictions out there that are requiring something along those lines. So that may be one too. Wonderful. Thanks for all your thoughts, everyone, on that. Now, when we talk about this, it doesn't exclude the total building performance compliance path or the energy rating index compliance path. If you happen to be utilizing the total building performance option, you have 2 ways of being able to comply. One is that you do one of the additional efficiency packages that we just took a look at, but when you do that, you cannot include it into your proposed design. It's just basically you're doing this on top of everything that you're proposing to do. Or your other option is to demonstrate that you have an annual energy cost that's 95% of what the reference design home is. Now, when it comes to the energy rating index, your only way of being able to demonstrate compliance is that your ERI number is 5% less than what is seen in the table for R406.5. Now, I know we're getting towards the end here, and I want to make sure that we have time for all the questions that are coming in. I also want to help me help you type of situation. What is it that you as an architect and a designer can do to help everybody down the road and make it so that everybody loves to get your plans? Because I love to provide this information for architects, because I want everybody to be like, hey, ABC Architecture, we got plans from them. Yay, we know it's going to be a good one. But I want it to be where it's not just one architect firm that they're like, oh, it's too bad that this isn't, one of the 100 architect firms that are really good at it. We got one that isn't. So the first thing that you could potentially do is place all the energy items on its own sheet. Here's an example of one. This is just one of the energy sheets. They have multiple sheets, and it provides a whole lot of information for me that I can go and determine exactly how to do the energy review. And let's face it, if I only have to go to a couple of sheets, I may not have any review comments because I can find the information. If I have to hunt and peck, I'm going to find review comments. The other thing is, you have this tool. If you are going with the total UA option in the prescriptive path where you're using ResCheck, there is this nice little table in here that when you're filling it out, you have to actually click whether it is a requirement that's met or a requirement that's not met. And then it gives you the option of being able to put the reference page down, put the page in there, tell me exactly where to go, so that I know what the ceiling insulation is. I go to A3. Oh my gosh, that makes my life easier. It's going to make your life easier too. Makes the contractor's life easier, makes the inspector's life easier. Let's make energy easy. The other item is to utilize an index. And with that index, as you can see here, you can say what the component is. It's from a company that whenever I get plans that they're going performance, they give me this. It's an index on a sheet, tells me exactly where to find it. It is fantastic. It makes life so much easier for everyone who utilizes the projects down the road. All love getting projects done by them. The other item is create a code analysis. In that energy code analysis, give me all the information. Tell me what path you're utilizing, the additional efficiency package, any sort of little options in there, what you're going to utilize. Put it in your energy code analysis. Now, remember that there are a lot of resources out there for you. Erica alluded to some of the resources that is provided within the adoption toolkit. Excel also has a web page that provides a list of information for you. But not only that, we actually have a submittal checklist that if you reach out to me, I'm very happy to provide for you. And in this submittal checklist, it tells you exactly what needs to be submitted for plan review. And it is broken up into various compliance paths. So if you're going with the R value alternative, it tells you everything that needs to be submitted with the R value alternative. If you're going with the total building performance, it's going to tell you everything that needs to be submitted. And we have it for the 18 and we have it for the 21. And just as Erica mentioned, we have this wonderful tool that is available right now. Use it. It's fantastic. I cannot tell you how wonderful it is. And then there's going to be a survey that goes out. Here is my contact information. And Erica, we have time for questions, I hope.
We are at the hour, but hope if you've got a few minutes to stay on, I'm sure the attendees would appreciate that.
I will stay. I will put a caveat on. My power's been out since before 9 o'clock this morning. So my laptop is getting towards the end of it, so I will be happy to answer questions as long as my laptop will permit it.
Sounds good. We'll take it, Hope. Well, thanks for this great presentation today. You've covered so much information. So feel free to reach out to Hope. Her info is on the screen if you have follow-up questions that we don't get to today. But to kick us off, I've got a few questions for you, Hope. And I think you kind of touched on this one a little bit in the beginning, but can you explain the insulation and fenestration criteria as a sole compliance path, and how is this submitted? I think we kind of covered the compliance path maybe a little bit, but not how is this submitted?
Yeah, so if you happen, don't look at the screen because I don't want to make you sick here. So if you happen to be utilizing the insulation and fenestration criteria, you're under the 15 and the 18, everything is going to be placed on the plans. There's no special reports that are going to be required for it. So you're going to put the R values, the materials, all of that's going to be listed on the plans, and the information for the fenestration is going to be on that. Now, if you're under the 21, the same would be said if you're utilizing the R value alternative, because remember that these particular options flip-flopped in the 21. I hope that answers the question.
Perfect. Thanks, Hope. I'm just going to take a minute. Are you able to provide the slides to me so that we can post
Oh,
them
yes,
somehow?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Great. So we'll have those posted on the Code Adoption Toolkit. All right, next question. On the fenestration for the window schedule, if you were to have it listed on the plans, but the window sticker is less yet still meets the minimum requirement, would you require a revision to the plans?
That is an excellent question, because here's the if you were strictly going by what the code says, the energy code, it says the maximum is a 0.30. They installed they said on the plans it was going to be a 0.28, but they installed a 0.30, which still would meet the code. The problem comes in is when you start talking about that manual J, because your heating and cooling loads, one of the two most heavily weighted components that are going to affect your heating and cooling loads is your ceiling design and your windows. So that one isn't necessarily just a across the board type of situation. If I looked at the manual J and they were on the cusp of being oversized or undersized and they changed the value to the windows, I may at that point ask the question, is this mechanical equipment still going to be able to function properly with the change in the windows?
Perfect. Thanks, Hope. All right. Do you happen to know where the compliance paths are referenced in the code?
Yes, if you go into R401, it's actually listed right there. It's the first one. You have to comply with one of these options. It's a little bit more complicated for the 21 because that's also where it includes you must comply with the additional efficiency packages, but it's all listed in R401.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Got a good question here. When reviewing heated residential accessory buildings, is blower door testing required?
That is an excellent question. So when we start talking about accessory structures, if you go into the chapter 1 and it talks about when the energy code is required, if the place is being heated at that point or conditioned in whatever fashion, it would be required to comply with the energy code. And so without having direct access to my code book right at this moment, I apologize. It used to say that if it was an accessory structure, or there's a lot of code proposals that talk about getting that included, I believe in the 24, it will be very explicit that accessory structures will be required to comply. I know that's not exactly answering the question.
Well, good. I think it at least starts the discussion. And Ted, if you have if you want to connect with Hope after this, that go for it. It's Hope Medina at Shumskoda Associates. Is that right?
Yeah, it's hope.medina@shumskoda.com.
Perfect. All right, we do have a few more questions, hoping we can squeeze that in, and we do have some raised hands. So why don't we hit the raised hands? Alvin, did you have a question that you'd like to ask? I've allowed you to talk, so you just have to go ahead and unmute yourself if you do.
No question.
Okay. Next up is Debbie Fallenwider. And I have allowed you to talk, so go ahead and unmute yourself if you have a question.
No question.
Okay. And last for raised hands is Victor Mraz. I'm going to go ahead and allow you to talk if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm here. Hello?
No
Hello?
question? Okay.
No, yeah, maybe everything's good. Thank you.
Okay. Just checking. Thank you. All right. So going back over to the questions that we've gotten written in, Tristan is asking, what about a bathroom in a garage? And I'm guessing that's for, is that for blower door testing? And is that related to blower door testing, Tristan? I allowed you to talk, so go ahead and unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's just to meet the energy code. Just a half bath in a garage. Does that have to meet the energy code? Oh, I'll put it that way, just simply.
Okay. Is it being conditioned?
Yes, I would probably put a little built-in space heater with a thermostat, just because there's water lines going up to the upper ADU unit. And so it does have to be conditioned and insulated. I just would like to know if I need to submit a full manual J just for that half bath.
I don't know that I necessarily would submit it just in that particular instance. But that would have to fall to the jurisdictional call, because technically, because you're installing a new equipment, it would require a manual J to be performed. So that you are, getting the right sized equipment. But if the intent is that you are just installing equipment to make sure that we don't have frozen pipes, they may have a policy in place that it limits the size of what the heater can be and what the heater can do type deal, and the temperature that it can reach. So my suggestion would be to reach out to the jurisdiction and see if they have something set up.
Yeah, and that's what I plan to do, is just, make sure it meets their requirements and the intent, of course. So, all right, thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Tristan. All right, we've got lots of questions on evaporative coolers, Hope. First off, are we going to be able to use evaporative coolers? How will this affect evaporative coolers? And there's a couple others, so I'll log that over to you.
As far as the equipment, there isn't a ban on very specific equipment that can be utilized within various parameters. So in theory, you still would be able to utilize an evaporative cooler. There's nothing jumping out at me right off the top of my head that states that you would not be able to use that, either from the energy code or from on the side of the new state energy law.
Yeah, I don't think that it still permits evaporative coolers in the code, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
we're looking at that for Denver, and whether or not we should allow it. due to the water consumption,
Yeah.
but
I think it's more of a water concern more than an energy concern, because we have an evaporative cooler, you know, in our 100-year-old house that we can't really do a whole lot with. And I will say that our energy usage with it when we had it on was drastically reduced from when we had fans or any other sort of equipment for it. So I can't imagine that something like that would be, and the energy code isn't really all about restricting items. It's more of how can we make what we have and have it utilized better type of situation.
yeah, great point, Hope. Okay, do you know if evaporative coolers and mini splits, how that applies to the thermal envelope? Is there anything specific related to that? I don't remember in terms of code if there is anything related. With
Yeah,
the
there's
interlocking.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot as far as on the residential side of, I mean, there are some controls, you know, you have to have thermostats. You know, if it's making sure that there isn't, or if you do utilize electric resistance heat, you know, that it's under certain parameters. But as far as the 21 goes, you still would, whether you're utilizing an evaporative cooler, a mini split, or you're putting in a fuel fired furnace, you're still going to comply with the same type of requirements. You're going to be doing a manual J. You're going to make sure that those spaces that are being conditioned are within that thermal envelope. You're going to have a strong thermal envelope. You're going to make sure that the right type of controls are installed. So you're still following those same type of parameters, whether you're utilizing a certain type of equipment compared to another one. Now, where it may come into play a little bit more is along the side of that additional efficiency package that may determine looking at a different option as opposed to maybe what your first intent was.
Great, thank you, Hope. And that actually reminded me, I wanted to mention that we do have manual J, S, and D recorded trainings available on the Code Adoption Toolkit for anyone that would like a more in-depth training on those.
Perfect. And then we also have a manual J, S, and D breakdown documents that break down how to read those particular reports too. So between the
Oh, yeah.
the videos on the toolkit and the technical documents, we're going to get you guys all trained up on manual J, S, and Ds.
Great. Well, I do see a couple of raised hands here to Keith Leach, or I'm going to go ahead and hold on one second, allow you to talk if you'd like to unmute yourself. Oh, I think he just dropped off. Oh,
Hello?
there you are.
I have a question on the energy code. As far as we make the house so tight, and then you're requiring us to actually cut a hole, bring in fresh air from outside because we made it tight. I'm confused at why we're making it so tight just to add more fresh air from outside because they're too tight.
Well, the buildings aren't exactly too tight, and they're not necessarily requiring that you know, a hole be cut in. The ventilation requirements have always been a part of the mechanical section, whether we're talking IRC or IMC, for our buildings. But remember, when you don't have a tight building, you are allowing that conditioning to leak in and out. Now, I'll tell you, I live in a 100-year-old home and ventilation is not a problem, I'll tell you. But also, today was a rather warm day, and prior to the power going out, my house was at 70 degrees. Within an hour, I was down to 64 degrees because of the fact that I don't have as tight of a home that was even built 30 years ago or have the insulation of 30 years ago. So there's a reason why we are really looking at that concept of, you know, a tight building. It's to have a good thermal envelope. And part of the portion for that is our insulation. How it gets those R values is because those stagnant pockets of air. If we allow the air movement to go through those particular assemblies, then we remove those stagnant pockets of air and we do not get the R values within our thermal envelope, which is why we are building tight. Part of also is we want to control when and where we have air movement that comes in and out of our buildings, which is why we then have the whole house mechanical ventilation option. Now, with that,
So-
you do
so-
have 3 options for it.
So when we do that, and then for energy, maybe I misunderstood this, I don't know. But when we do make the ventilation for outside air come in because they're tight, doesn't that require a fan? And therefore, isn't it using energy?
It may
doesn't it run
require a
24/7?
fan. It's going to be dependent on, a lot on, which strategy you utilize. And so that could be the exhaust only. That would be a fan could be involved. It could be the supply only, which may or may not necessarily require a fan. And then you have the balance, which could be an ERV or an HRV type of system. So there's always going to be the intent of some energy usage to happen, just like, our lights. Now we utilize energy for our lights and we utilize energy to heat and cool the place. So there's always going to be the energy use concept. Are we utilizing our energy in a smart fashion or in a smart design? And that's kind of what the whole house mechanical ventilation and the requirement, of potentially you will be utilizing a fan or some sort of energy to have it function.
Okay, I was just trying to get a grasp on it, and I didn't know if my customers would care for cold air in the wintertime blowing in just to make up that tight, because it's tight, they have to have fresh air every day of the year, whether it's hot air blowing in from outside or cold air. And then you're using energy. And I've already determined I'm just going to say these are the new codes and you're just going to have to live with it. But because there's nothing I can do, because I will meet or do what your requirements are. So at that point, there will be nothing I can do personally to make it a better, tighter form, or not get that draft in the hallway or wherever we put the fresh air coming in. That's
And
just.
David, we do have some trainings on the breakdown of the ventilation options, and how to control those items, and like using an HRV or an ERV would then eliminate the cold air that would be coming in. So David, if you want to reach out to me or Hope, we can help direct you to those resources and
Okay.
hopefully get you a good comprehensive understanding of all the options available to you.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Wonderful question. Thanks for asking.
Perfect. Well, we've got a couple more hands up, Hope, but I hope we don't lose you in the midst of the next few questions. But if we do, please utilize that code helpline. It's here as a resource to everyone in Colorado on any projects. So that's a great place to go if we do get cut off here. The next participant that I see has a hand raised is Derek Place. I'm going to go ahead and allow you to talk, Derek, if you want to unmute yourself. And Hope, we do have a question of if you could put your contact info back on the screen. I know that you wrote it in the chat.
Let me see what I can do here.
And Derek, do we have you live?
Uh-oh. I have no. Okay.
if that works. All right, we're not hearing Derek. All right, next is John Van Essen. I'm gonna go ahead and allow you to talk if you want to unmute yourself.
Hi, Hope and Erica, thank you for this awesome class. I just wanted to help the previous caller. Was his name Michael?
I believe it was David.
David, yeah. Well, remember when we bring in fresh air, we bring it into the return air side of the furnace. And you mentioned, Erica, that we do have some preheating systems that can be, so it's not like we cut a hole in the house and bring in cold air like Hope's 100-year-old house. It is in a controlled environment and it's going to be heated. So just wanted to clarify that for him because he was struggling with that. That's all I have.
Perfect. Thanks, John. Appreciate you
welcome.
jumping in there. All right, and then one more question for you here, Hope. How to handle / what to expect for submittal for equipment and system controls where the building department doesn't do electrical and plumbing permit inspections?
That is an excellent question, and it's something that we actually talk about quite a bit. And part of that has to deal with the fact that the energy code touches on all the trades, right? It's not just specific to the framers or to the plumbers or to the mechanical or the electricians. It encompasses all of the trades. So with that being said, you have to look at getting energy compliance where it is maybe the best part would be is making sure that you can get that documented on the plans. Because the reality is at this moment, the state plumbing inspectors, when they go out, they inspect to the Colorado plumbing code. When the state electrical inspectors go out, they're currently inspecting to what's in the NEC, and they're not necessarily looking at the components that energy would fall under. So it's one of those time-old discussions of who is going to inspect or who is going to review the energy components when it comes to those particular trades. When you get past 402, then it kind of falls into who's doing what and where. And so my suggestion is get it all placed on the plans, require it at submittal, whether you have somebody necessarily going out and inspecting all the plumbing requirements or all the electrical requirements because it's done by the state, but at least you have it on the plans with the intent that hopefully it's getting done out in the field, and maybe have the conversation with the state. Are you looking at these are energy and electrical components of the energy code? And that would be my suggestion on how to address that issue.
Perfect. Thanks, Hope. Great question. All right, and we've got just a couple of more administrative questions, but I'm going to go ahead and end the recording now.